He did not come to the diner for the coffee. Corvin Mardell came to wait out a man he meant to bury by sunrise, and he had killed for less than a debt. Nothing had made him flinch in years. Then a waitress he had never seen set his check down, and under the total, in small even letters, were 2 words. Leave now. He looked up, and for the first time in 11 years, Corvin Mardell forgot how to breathe. The Kestrel Diner sat at the dead seam of the city, where the clean streets lost their nerve and the ruined ones had not yet decided what they wanted to become. It was the kind of place that existed only for people with nowhere better to be at that hour: truckers, insomniacs, and men like Corvin, who preferred their meetings on ground that belonged to no one. The booths were the color of old mustard. A radio behind the counter played something soft and dead. The whole room smelled of scorched coffee and floor cleaner, and Corvin had chosen it precisely because it was beneath the notice of every family in the city, including his own. He had come to wait for a man named Ferris Doyle, a bookmaker, who had been skimming from the Mardell tables for 3 months, and thought the distance to the edge of the map would keep him breathing. It would not. Corvin had told Doyle to meet him here at midnight to explain himself, and Corvin intended to listen to every word. Before he decided, nothing at all had changed. His driver, Bram, sat in the black sedan across the street, with the engine off and a shotgun laid across his knees. Everything was in its place. Corvin liked the world best when it was in its place. She had not been in its place. The waitress moved through the room, the way water moves through a drain, quietly, without asking permission. Gone before you understood she had been there. She was not beautiful in a way that stopped traffic. She was plain in a deliberate, practiced manner. Brown hair pulled back with a rubber band, a shapeless apron, tired shoes worn soft at the heel. Her name tag said Linnea in faded marker. When she had poured his coffee an hour ago, she had not looked at him twice, which he had noticed, because everyone looked at Corvin Mardell twice. People could not help it. Something in the animal part of them knew to be afraid. Not her. She had filled his cup, said nothing, and drifted off to refill the sugar jars as though he were furniture. Now she was walking away from his table with an empty pot, and Corvin was staring at a slip of paper that should have read $4, and a tip he would never leave, and instead read "leave now," and his whole trained body had gone still as stone. He did not move his head. He moved his eyes. He found them in under 2 seconds, because she had already told him exactly what to look for. 2 men, a booth by the door, both facing the room instead of each other. Heavy coats for a night that was not cold enough for them. One had his hand under the table. The other was watching the front window, not the door, which meant he was watching the street, which meant he was watching for a signal. They had come in quietly while Corvin read a menu he had no use for, and he had missed them. And a waitress in worn shoes had not. The coffee went cold in his hand. In 11 years, no one had seen a thing coming before Corvin saw it first. Not his enemies, not his own men. It was the single reason he was still alive, and so many better men were not. He set the receipt face down on the table, slow and easy. A man who had decided nothing. Linnea was standing at the far end of the counter with her back half turned, wiping down a surface that was already clean, and she was watching him in the dark mirror behind the pie case. Her face held no fear and no plea. It held a flat, terrible calm that he recognized, because it was his own, the calm of a person who has already counted every exit in a room and knows which 2 of them lead to a wall. For one long, impossible second, she looked at him as if she knew him. Then she mouthed one word, slow, so he could not mistake it. Go. Corvin Mardell did not run from anything. He had built an entire life on that fact, stone by stone, body by body, until the word run had been sanded out of him completely. Every instinct he owned told him to stay in the booth, to let the 2 men by the door commit to their mistake, to answer it the way he answered everything, with a cold and total finality that would leave the diner quiet again in 90 seconds. But the 2 words on the receipt were not a threat, and they were not a bluff. They were a gift, and Corvin had learned long ago that when a stranger hands you something for nothing, the only intelligent question is why. He was still turning it over, still deciding, when the little bell above the front door gave its cheap, bright chime. A third man stepped in out of the dark. He was tall, unhurried, and he did not glance at the 2 in the booth, which was exactly how Corvin knew they were his. The newcomer let the door swing shut behind him, unbuttoned his coat with the ease of a man who owned the room, and smiled at nothing. Corvin knew that face. He had shaken that hand at his own engagement dinner 3 weeks ago. Behind the counter, the waitress set down her rag. What happened next happened in the dark. The waitress did not scream, and she did not duck. She reached under the lip of the counter, and every light in the Kestrel diner died at once. The room dropped into a blackness so complete that the 2 men by the door lost the one thing a shooter cannot work without, which is a target he can see. Corvin was already moving. He had spent his life learning to be most dangerous in exactly this kind of dark. And he came out of the booth low and fast, driving his shoulder into the nearest gunman before the man could adjust. There was a grunt, the clatter of a pistol skidding under a table, and then the front door burst open and Bram filled it with a shape like a wall and a voice like a landslide, and the fight was already over. It always is, once the surprise belongs to the other side. By the time the emergency light over the kitchen buzzed on, weak and orange, the 2 men were gone out the back, and the tall man who had walked in smiling was gone out the front, swallowed by the street the same easy way he had arrived. Nobody was dead. That, more than anything, unsettled Corvin. In his world, people did not aim at him and then simply leave. They finished, or they were finished. This had been a test, and he did not yet know whose. He turned, breathing slow, and looked for her. Linnea was crouched behind the counter, sweeping the shards of a coffee pot she had knocked over in the dark into a neat pile with the side of her hand. She was not shaking. She never looked up at the man who had just thrown another man across her workplace. She simply gathered the broken glass the way a person gathers laundry, as if the last minute had been a spill and nothing more, and Corvin understood, with a cold prickle at the back of his neck, that this was the most frightening thing he had seen all night. He had spent 11 years in a business that taught him to read people, the way other men read weather. Fear had a smell, nerve had a posture. This woman had neither. She had something rarer and much worse, the absolute economy of someone who had done frightening things so many times that they no longer cost her anything. He knew that stillness. He shaved with it in the mirror every morning. "Who are you?" Corvin said. It was not really a question. It was the closest thing he had to one. "I am the person who is going to have to explain a broken window to my manager," she said, still sweeping. "You should go before the police. Remember, this street exists." His phone was buzzing in his coat. He did not answer it. He knew who it was. Silas Renard, his consigliere, the man who had raised him after his father died, the man who had spent the last year stitching together the truce that was supposed to end the long, slow war between the Mardells and the Varga family. A truce sealed, like all such things, with a marriage, Corvin's marriage. Silas would be calling to ask why Corvin had gone dark, and Corvin would have to decide how much of tonight to tell him. And that he was even asking himself that question about Silas told him how far the ground had already shifted under his feet. He looked back down at the waitress. "Those men came for me," he said, quietly. "You knew before I did." "How?" For the first time, she stopped sweeping. She sat back on her heels and looked up at him, and in the sick orange light, her plain, tired face was not plain at all. It was watchful and old behind the eyes in a way that had nothing to do with her years. Coats too heavy, both facing out, one watching the window, not the door, she said, in the flat, clipped rhythm of someone reading a list she had memorized long ago. "The one by the window." kept touching his ear. You do not touch your ear unless someone is talking into it. She shrugged, and the ordinariness came back down over her like a shade being drawn. People see what they expect to see. A waitress refills the sugar. She does not count exits. You counted mine. I count everyone's. She stood, brushing glass from her apron. It is a bad habit. I would recommend it. Outside, a car slowed on the wet street, then thought better of it, and rolled on. Linnea tracked the sound without turning her head, filed it, and let it go. Corvin caught the tiny motion and felt something in his chest tip sideways, the way a floor tips in a dream. Corvin Mardell had been feared, obeyed, hunted, and betrayed. He had not, in a very long time, been surprised. He found he had no idea what to do with the feeling. So he did the only thing his life had trained into his bones. He memorized her, the set of her shoulders, the way she kept the counter between them without seeming to. The 3 exits she had already placed herself equidistant from. "Tell me your name," he said. "Your real one." She carried the dustpan to the bin and tipped the broken glass in, and the small sound of it was very loud in the empty diner. "Good night, Mr. Mardell," she said. He had never told her his name. Corvin should have forgotten her by morning. That was the discipline the life required. You saw a strange thing, you filed it, you moved on, because a man who chased every loose thread eventually strangled on one. He had buried better mysteries than a waitress with sharp eyes. He told himself this in the car, and again in the shower, and again at his desk, as the gray dawn came up over the water, and none of it took. The 2 words kept surfacing in him like a body that would not stay weighted down. Leave now. She had spent something to write them. He needed to know what, and why, and for whom. "Let it go," Silas Renard said. They were in the study of the Mardell house, the room where the real decisions were made, all dark wood and older money. Silas stood at the window with a coffee he was not drinking, silver-haired and calm, and the man who had taught Corvin which forks to use and which men to kill. He had been calm last night on the phone, too. He had been calm when Corvin told him about the 2 shooters and the 3rd man who had smiled at nothing. A little too calm, Corvin thought now, and hated himself for thinking it. "A woman I have never seen warned me about a hit I did not know was coming," Corvin said. "In a diner, I picked at random an hour before it happened. And you want me to let it go? I want you to marry Renata Varga in 9 days and end a war that has cost this family more sons than I can count," Silas said. "Whoever that woman is, she is a complication. The truce is not. Do not trade the second for the first." He turned from the window, and his eyes were kind, which was the thing about Silas that had always made him easy to obey. You have enemies enough without adopting a stray one. It was good advice. It was the advice Corvin himself would have given. That was precisely why it bothered him that Silas was so eager to give it. By noon, Bram had what little there was. There was not much. Linnea Kaur, the name on the diner payroll, was 13 months old as a person. Before that there was nothing. No school, no lease, no photograph, no debt, no history at all. As if she had been printed one morning and handed an apron. She was paid in cash. She rented a room above a shuttered laundromat, 6 blocks from the Kestrel, and paid that in cash too. She owned, as far as anyone could tell, nothing that would not fit in a single bag left by a single door. "People with no past are hiding one," Bram said, laying the thin folder on the desk. "Usually, it is a bad one. Witnesses, informants, women running from men who hit them." He paused. "But those people are afraid, boss. They flinch." "You said she did not flinch." "She did not flinch." Corvin agreed. He looked at the folder for a long time. A woman with no history who read a room like a soldier and vanished into a waitress, like water into sand. Every part of his training told him she was dangerous, and that dangerous strangers were problems you removed, not questions you asked. And yet she had spent whatever it cost her to keep him alive, and she had wanted nothing for it, had not even given him the small satisfaction of a name he could put in a debt column. That was the part he could not reconcile. In Corvin's world, nobody gave anything away. Everything was priced. She had handed him his own life, across a counter, and walked off before he could pay. He went back that night. He told himself it was strategy. A person who could see a hit coming was an asset, and assets were secured. He did not examine the other reason, the one that had him standing on a wet corner, across from a diner at 11 o'clock, like a much younger and much stupider man. The Kestrel was closing. Through the window he watched her stack chairs, wipe the counter, turn the sign, small ordinary motions that a person hunted by the whole world had no business making so calmly. She came out the side door into the alley with a bag of trash and that single bag by her side. And Corvin stepped out of the dark where she could see him. Because he was not a man who came at people from behind, she did not startle. Of course, she did not. "You are not very good at being warned," she said. "I am worse at being confused." He came a step closer, into the cone of the one working streetlight, so that for the first time they stood in real light together and he saw her clearly, the exact line of her jaw, the small old scar through one eyebrow, the shape of a face he had spent 11 years teaching himself not to remember, because remembering. The city went very quiet. "It is not possible," Corvin said. His voice did not sound like his own. "You died. I stood in that house. I saw what was left of that room. There was no one who could have walked out of it." She looked at him and the last of the plainness fell away, and what was underneath was grief and iron in equal measure. "Say the name," she said softly. "You already know it." And Corvin Mardell, who feared nothing, whispered the name of a girl who had been dead for 11 years. "Sabine," he had said. And the woman who called herself Linnea Core closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, the way a person does when a wound they have kept clean for years is touched at last, and then opened them again, and she was steady. "No one has called me that in 11 years, she said. "I would like to keep it that way." She did not run. That surprised him almost as much as the name. She stood in the cone of the streetlight, with her single bag at her feet, and she looked at Corvin Mardell the way you look at weather rolling in off the water, something too large to fight and too old to be angry at anymore. "You were supposed to be dead," Corvin said. His voice had come back to him, but it was low and cracked at the edges. "I told them you were dead. I told him you were dead. I know what you told him." She said the word him with a small, terrible weight, and Corvin felt the whole night turn a quarter turn on its axis. "I have known all these years exactly what you told him, and exactly what he did with it. Do you think I have been washing coffee cups? Because I like the smell?" The alley was empty and wet and smelled of rain, on old brick. Somewhere a train dragged itself across a distant bridge. Corvin had walked into 100 rooms, knowing he would leave them and other men would not, and he had never once felt the ground move the way it was moving now. He made himself think it was the only thing that had ever saved him. "The diner tonight," he said slowly. "You did not happen to be there. You have been there 13 months. You took a job at a diner on the edge of the city and waited." He watched her face and found the answer in how little it gave him. "You were not waiting for me. No, you were waiting for him. I was waiting for the night. He finally sent you somewhere quiet to die," Sabine said. "Because I knew that when he did, it would mean he was done with you. And when a man like that is done with you, he becomes careless. And careless is the only way I will ever get close enough." She picked up her bag. "You were not supposed to look up, Corvin. You were supposed to read 2 words. Get in your car and live 1 more week. That was all I wanted from you. 1 more week of you being alive," and in his way it landed on him piece by piece. The meeting with Doyle, that Doyle had never come to. The diner he thought he had chosen at random, suggested 3 days ago, so lightly, by a man drinking coffee, he never touched. The 2 shooters who did not finish. The 3rd man who smiled and left, because the job had never been to kill Corvin in that booth. The job had been to see whether Corvin would walk into a quiet room alone when Silas told him to. "Silas set the meeting," Corvin said. "Silas set all of it," Sabine said. "He set it 11 years ago too. You were 20. You did what the man who raised you told you to do, and you have spent your whole life believing the worst thing you ever did was your own idea." She shouldered the bag. "It was his. It was always his. I am the only person left alive who can prove it, which is exactly why I am supposed to be dead." For a moment, Corvin was not in the alley at all. He was 20 years old again, standing in a doorway with a gun that felt too heavy, in a house where the noise had stopped and should not have, and there was a girl pressed into the gap behind a wardrobe, with her hand over her own mouth, so she would not make a sound. He remembered her eyes. He had told himself for 11 years that he did not remember her eyes. He had put her out a back window into the dark, and gone back inside, and said the words that saved his own life. No one left. And he had believed, because he needed to, that the dark had finished what he could not. The dark had grown her up and sharpened her and sent her back to him across a diner counter with 2 words and a warning he had not deserved. She turned to go, and Corvin, who did not reach for people, caught her by the arm. "Where do you think you are going?" he said. She looked down at his hand on her sleeve, and then up at him, and for the first time all night, something moved behind her eyes that was not calm. "Away from you," she said. "You are the most watched man in this city, and you just stood in a lit alley and said, 'My name out loud every hour I stand near you is an hour closer to the thing I cannot afford.'" She pulled her arm free, not roughly, just certainly, the way she did everything. "I got you your week. Do not waste it looking for me." And she walked out of the light, and the dark took her so completely that if not for the ache in his chest, Corvin might have believed he had imagined the whole thing. He did not go after her. He stood in the alley a long time. Then he took out his phone, and he did not call Silas, and the not calling was the first decision of the war, though he did not know it yet. He found her again 2 nights later, which told him something, because a woman unwilling to be found by Corvin Mardell would not have been found. She let him find her. She was sitting on the seawall at the end of the old fish market, eating cold noodles out of a carton, watching the black water, and she gave no sign when his footsteps came up behind her. "You are supposed to be forgetting me," she said. "I have never been good at doing what I am supposed to." He sat down on the wall beside her, an arm's length away, and looked at the same water she was looking at. "I can put you somewhere. He will never reach a house in another country. New papers, real ones, better than the ones you made. Money you will not be able to spend in one lifetime. You would never have to see a diner again." "No," Sabine said. "You have not heard the rest. There is no rest." She set the carton down between them. "You think you are offering me freedom. You are offering me a cage with a nicer view. The day I take $1 from you is the day I belong to you. And I have spent 11 years belonging to no one, which is the only reason I am still breathing." She finally looked at him. "Men like you cannot understand a person who wants nothing from you. It breaks something in your head. I watched it break in your head the first night across the counter." She was right, and being right was the most dangerous thing about her. Corvin had spent his life among people who wanted, and want was a rope you could hold. She held no rope. Every no she handed him should have made her easier to walk away from. Instead, each one set the hook deeper, and he was clear-eyed, enough to be afraid of it. That was when the car came. He heard it before he saw it, a low engine dropping to a crawl on the market road behind them, headlights off. Sabine was already moving. She did not run for open ground the way frightened people do. She went sideways and down, into the black slot between 2 shuttered stalls, and she took Corvin's sleeve as she went, not for herself, he realized later, but to pull him out of the light. They pressed into the dark together, her back against the cold metal shutter, his arm braced over her, and the car rolled past slow. A window down, a shape scanning the empty wall where 2 people had been sitting a moment before. It went on. It turned at the end of the market and did not come back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. She was close enough that he could feel her breathing a soldier's breath, but her heart was going hard under the thin jacket. And Corvin understood that the calm was a thing she built new every minute, not a thing she simply had. Those were not his best men, she murmured. Those were men he could spare. He is not sure yet. He is fishing. She slid out from under his arm and stood, brushing herself off. You should be more careful about who sees you sitting with a dead woman. She bent to pick up her bag, and it tipped. And before she could catch it, a few things slid out onto the wet stone. Corvin crouched to help before he thought better of it. And his hand closed on a bus ticket, a real paper ticket, to a town 3 hours north he had never had reason to hear of, dated for the coming Sunday. Under it was a photograph, creased soft from handling, of a boy, perhaps 16, laughing at something out of frame. Standing in front of a house, Corvin did not know. Sabine went very still. Snatching would have told him they mattered. She held out her hand, flat and calm, and waited, and it was the calm that told him everything, because it was too much calm, the kind a person spends their whole strength to hold. Give them back, she said quietly. Who is he? Corvin said. Give them back, Corvin. He looked at the photograph, at the boy's easy laugh, and 11 years rearranged themselves one more time. A girl pressed behind a wardrobe with her hand over her mouth, and he saw now another shape lower down, half behind her, that he had let himself believe was a shadow. You did not go out that window alone, Corvin said. For the length of 3 heartbeats, she said nothing, and Corvin watched her decide whether to lie. He had seen a great many people make that decision. He had never seen anyone make it while looking so much like they might come across the space between them and put out his eyes for holding a photograph. His name is Tomas, she said at last, and the name came out of her like something pried loose. He was 5. He was under the bed when they came, and then he was behind me at the wardrobe, and then he was in my arms, going out the window, into your dark. He does not remember the house. He does not remember the noise. He thinks our parents died in a fire, because a fire is a thing a child can hold, and the truth is, a thing that would eat him alive. Her voice did not rise. It went lower and harder, which was worse. He is at a school. He thinks I pay for by waitressing. He believes his sister is boring. He believes he is safe. Every one of those things is a wall I built with my own hands, and you are standing here in a lit market, holding the one photograph that could knock all 3 of them down. Corvin looked at the boy laughing in front of the ordinary house, and he understood, finally and completely, why she could not be bought, and could not be frightened for herself. She had already spent her whole life. There was nothing left in her to threaten. Everything she had poured into a 16-year-old boy 3 hours north, who thought his sister was boring. He held out the photograph and the ticket. She took them, and folded them away against her body. If Silas learns that boy exists, she said, he will not kill me. He is cleverer than that. He will take Tomas and he will send me a piece of him in the mail, and he will own me for the rest of a very short life. She stepped back into the dark. That is why I said no. That is why I will always say no. Now do you see? And then, faint and far off across the market, a phone began to ring in her bag, the second phone, the one she used for only one person in the world, at an hour that person never called. She had the second phone out before the third ring. She turned away from him to answer it, an old reflex, keeping her face private, and Corvin watched her spine change. He had seen men take bullets and give away less than Sabine gave away in the 4 seconds she listened. When, she said. And then, who asked? Say it again, who asked? She lowered the phone. When she turned back, her face had gone the color of the wet stone under their feet. A man came to the school this afternoon, she said. Well-dressed, kind. He said he was from a scholarship foundation, and he wanted to meet the boy who had done so well on his examinations. Tomas was at a football match. The office told the man to come back Monday. Her hand, holding the phone, was not quite steady. There is no foundation. There is no scholarship. There is only one man in the world, careful enough to knock on the front door of a thing he intends to take. The market was silent except for the water. Corvin felt the last piece drop into place, and it was heavier than all the others. He knows, Corvin said. Not for certain, but he has stopped fishing. He followed you. It was not an accusation. She was past accusations. She was somewhere colder, doing arithmetic. He put men on you because you would not let me go, and you led them to a seawall, and a clever man does not need to see the boy to find him. He only needed to see me care about something. She pressed the heel of her hand hard against her forehead. 11 years. 11 years of being no one, and it comes apart in 3 nights, because Corvin Mardell cannot leave a mystery alone. He should have felt the accusation. Instead, he felt something older and harder set in his chest. The thing that had made him what he was. The thing that answered a threat to what was his before his mind had finished forming the words. He noticed, distantly, that at some point in these 3 nights, the boy in the photograph had become a thing that was his to protect. And he did not question it, because Corvin Mardell had never in his life questioned that instinct, only ever the targets it chose. Listen to me, he said, and something in his voice made her look up. You have spent 11 years planning how to end Silas Renard alone. Alone was the right plan when it was only your life on the table. It is the wrong plan now. He is not fishing anymore, which means you are out of time, which means the woman who wants nothing from anyone is going to have to want one thing from me tonight. Or she is going to lose the only thing she has left. I do not work with people. People are how you get found. You are already found, Corvin said, and the plain truth of it hit her visibly, because she was too honest a tactician to argue with it. The only question left is whether the person who found you spends the next 11 years being the ghost, or whether he spends the next 11 days being the war. For the first time since a diner counter, Sabine Voss looked at him as if she were seeing not the boy who had stood in her doorway with a gun, and not the man the city was afraid of, but something in between that she had not planned for and did not want and could not quite make herself walk away from. Why, she said, and do not tell me it is guilt. I have watched guilty men. They are useless. Whatever this is, it is not that. Corvin was quiet for a moment. The honest answer frightened him more than any gun ever had, so he gave her a different true thing instead, which was all he had the courage for. Because for 11 years the one clean thing I ever did was put a girl out a window, he said, and I am not going to stand here and let him make it dirty. Something crossed her face that she did not let him keep. She looked away, out at the black water, and when she spoke again, the soldier was back, but the wall between them had thinned to paper. If we do this, she said, we do it my way. You do not touch him until I have what I need to bury the truth alongside the man. Or, Tomas grows up in a world that thinks his family were the villains. Proof first. Then you can be the monster everyone says you are. Agreed. She looked at his offered hand for a long moment, the way she had looked at everything he had offered her, and Corvin braced for one more no. Then she took it. Her grip was cold and hard and certain, and it was, he understood, the most expensive thing she had given anyone in all those years. He did not tell her the rest of what her yes had just cost him, because it was not hers to carry. Silas Renard had taught him to knot a tie, and to read a room, and to keep his hand steady when it mattered most. Silas had sat with him the night his father died, and told him the world was his now, and he would not have to be afraid in it. Everything Corvin knew about being a man he had learned from the man he was now going to have to put in the ground. He had killed a great many people, and felt each one exactly as much as he chose to. This one he already knew he would feel whether he chose to or not, for the rest of his life, and he found that he did not care, and that the not caring was its own kind of grief. Corvin lifted his own phone with his free hand and called Bram, and his voice when it came was the flat, quiet voice that had ended a great many things. "Wake, everyone. We trust," he said. "And bring me every file we have ever buried on Silas Renard." He hung up. "Now we go north," he told her. "We get the boy before Monday." But when Sabine tried the school's second number to warn them, no one picked up. And when she tried Tomas, the line rang once, and went dead, and did not ring again. They drove north through the dead middle of the night, the city falling away behind them into black fields, and the occasional lonely light. Sabine sat in the passenger seat of the fast, quiet car, with the dead phone in her lap, trying it every few minutes. And every few minutes it gave her nothing. And every few minutes, Corvin watched her not fall apart, which was worse than watching her fall apart. "He drops it in his bag at practice," she said to the windshield. "To no one. The battery is old. I keep meaning to buy him a new one. It goes dead all the time." "It means nothing." She tried it again. "Then it means nothing," Corvin said, and pushed the car faster. He did not tell her the other thing he was thinking, which was that a man like Silas would not have needed to touch the boy yet. Silas dealt in leverage, and leverage was only leverage while it was still whole. If Silas had the boy, the phone would not be dead. The phone would ring, and it would be Silas's voice, gentle and reasonable, naming a price. The silence, Corvin told himself, was almost proof the boy was still free. He did not say this out loud either, because hope offered by a man like him was a thing people had learned to distrust. They reached the town as the sky went from black to the color of a bruise. It was a small, ordinary place, a church, a shuttered market, a school with a football pitch behind it, gone silver with dew. Sabine had Corvin stop 2 streets away, and she went the rest on foot, alone, the way she had done everything for 11 years. And Corvin let her, because he understood that if he took even this from her, she would never forgive him. He watched from the car. He saw her go to a narrow house with a green door. He saw the door open. He saw a boy, tall and sleep-rumpled and gangly in the way of 16, blink at his sister on the step at dawn, and say something that made her put both hands over her face. Then the boy pulled her inside, complaining, ordinary, alive, and Corvin let out a breath he had been holding for 3 hours. The relief lasted exactly as long as it took Sabine to come back out. "He is fine," she said through the car window, and her voice was steady again, which meant the fear had found somewhere new to go. "He is fine. But the woman across the street says a man was parked on this road yesterday evening. Nice car. Sat an hour, did not get out. Left when the school bus came." She was already opening the back door, already reaching for the small case. That was all she would let the boy pack. He was not here for Tomas yet. He was here, to be sure. Tomas was here. That is how Silas works. He confirms the shelf before he takes the jar. They put the boy in the back seat. Thomas, told only that his sister needed to move him somewhere for a little while, took it with the easy trust of a child who has never been let down by the person telling him, and that trust, Corvin thought, was the whole of what Sabine had built with her life. The entire 11 years of it sitting in the back seat, complaining that he had not been allowed to bring his football. "Who is he?" Tomas asked, meaning Corvin, studying him in the mirror with open curiosity. "An old acquaintance of the family," Sabine said. "We do not have family." "We have this one," she said, and did not look at Corvin when she said it, and Corvin kept his eyes on the road and his hands very still on the wheel, because it was the closest thing to a gift she had given him, and he had no wish to spook it. They took the boy to a house Corvin owned under a name that was not his, a plain place on a lake, 3 hours the wrong way from anyone who would look. Bram met them there, with 2 men Corvin would trust with the last bullet in the world. By the time the sun was properly up, Tomas was asleep on a couch, and Sabine was standing at the window, watching him sleep the way she had probably watched him sleep 10,000 times. And Corvin was learning that a certain kind of exhaustion looks exactly like peace if you do not know the person wearing it. Sabine spoke without turning from the window. "You are staring at me again. I am trying to work out how one person carries a whole life on her back for 11 years and does not once set it down," Corvin said. "You set it down and it dies," she said simply. "So you do not set it down." She was quiet a moment. "You could have driven me to that green door and left. You did not have to come inside the last 3 hours of my nerve with me. Thank you for not making me say thank you for it. He was learning. The way she said the softest things, wrapped in a refusal, so he could not hold them against her later. He let it be enough. With her, enough was a country he was still learning the borders of. Then Bram came in from the yard, with his phone in his hand, and a look on his face that Corvin knew. Boss, Bram said quietly. We got the buried files on Silas out of the annex, like you said. Clean. No one saw. He hesitated. But 2 hours ago Silas moved his whole household to the compound and doubled the gate. He does not do that for nothing. He knows the ledgers walked. He does not know it was us yet, but he knows the ground shifted under him tonight, same as you did in that diner. Corvin looked at the boy asleep on the couch, and the woman who had spent everything to keep him that way, and he felt the last of the cold, ordered patience he had lived his whole life by burn quietly away. Good, Corvin said. Then we are done being quiet. They built the case on the kitchen table of a lake house, while a 16-year-old boy slept 2 rooms away, and it was the strangest work Corvin had ever done, because it was the first time in his life he had assembled a thing meant to save someone instead of end them. Sabine's proof was 11 years old, and terrible in its patience. She had a notebook, water-stained, its early pages written in the round, careful hand of a girl not yet 20, its later pages in the small hard print of the woman she had made herself into. Names. Dates. The bank in the Freeport that had moved her father's holdings the week after he died, to accounts that fed, 3 careful steps later, into the hands of Silas Renard. A photograph of a document she had spent 2 years getting close enough to photograph. She had been building a case against Silas since before she could legally drink 1 patient invisible inch at a time, and she had never had the one thing that would make it a weapon instead of a grief. She had never had a Mardell. Corvin had the buried files. He had a decade and more of a family's paper. And now that he knew where to look, the pattern surfaced like a body in a thaw. The rival house that had been blamed for the Voss killings had never had the men or the money to do it. Someone had needed a war between 2 families in order to be the one who ended it, and the one who ended it had walked out of that decade, owning both. Silas had not inherited the Mardell world. He had built it out of Corvin's father's death and Corvin's own young hands, and he had let Corvin believe he sat at the head of a table that Silas had in truth never once left. He did not raise you to be his heir, Sabine said quietly, watching Corvin's face as he understood it. He raised you to be his cover, a frightening young king. Everyone watches. So no one watches the old man behind the chair. I know, Corvin said. His voice was very level. It was the levelness she had learned to be afraid of. They worked until the lake went pink, and somewhere in the smallest hour, the thing between them that had been thinning to paper for 3 nights finally tore. It was not dramatic. She reached for the same page he reached for, and their hands stopped, and neither moved them, and for once, Sabine Voss did not say no. She looked at him in the low light with all the walls down, and every year of the loneliness showing, and Corvin lifted his hand and touched her face the way you touch something you have spent your whole life being too dangerous to deserve. He kissed her once, slow, and she let him. And for a moment there was no diner and no ledger and no man behind any chair, only 2 people who had each been alone in a way most people never survive, finding out they had stopped being alone without noticing when. Then she drew back, her forehead against his, breathing unevenly for the first time since he had met her. When this is done, she said, there will be no case left between us, no war, no dead man. And you will still be exactly what you are, and I will still be exactly what I am. And we will have to find out whether there is anything underneath the fight worth keeping. She closed her eyes. Do not make me a promise tonight. I have watched 1,000 promises. I would rather have your silence than one more. So he gave her his silence, which was, from Corvin Mardell, the loudest thing he had. Near morning, The boy padded in, wrapped in a blanket, hair in every direction, and stopped when he saw Corvin at the table. He did not look afraid. He looked at the guns the way a boy looks at weather, and then he looked at his sister, saw she was not afraid, and decided by that alone that he need not be. "You are the old acquaintance," Thomas said. He sat down across from Corvin, uninvited, the way only the very safe or the very young sit down. "Sabine does not have acquaintances, she has me, and she has the diner. So, you are either a lie or you are important, and she is a terrible liar about small things, and a very good liar about large ones." So, he studied Corvin. "Which?" "Important," Corvin said, and found it was true, and found the boy's frank attention harder to sit under than any enemy's gun. "Can you keep her safe?" Tomas asked. And the whole of the child's real fear was in it, the fear he was not supposed to know he carried. "She thinks I do not notice she is tired." "I notice." Corvin looked at Sabine across the table, and she had gone, still caught, and he understood that this was the thing she had protected above even the boy's safety. The boy's not knowing, and that it had never once worked. "I am going to try," Corvin told him, "harder than I have ever tried at anything." Thomas nodded, satisfied in the way of someone who has decided to believe, and went to find something to eat, and Sabine put her hand briefly over her mouth and then took it away and pretended she had not. At dawn, he laid out the plan, and she hated it, and she agreed to it, because it was the only one that ended with Thomas free, and the Voss name clean, instead of merely avenged. "The families gather in 3 days," Corvin said. "For a wedding Silas built to finish taking everything. Every power in the city under one roof, watching. It is the one room where the truth cannot be buried quietly, because there are too many witnesses for Silas to kill them all, and too many rivals who would love a reason to move on him." He set his hand flat on her patient. "Years of proof. We do not stop the wedding. We let him have his stage, and then we take it from him on it, in front of every person whose respect he has spent his life stealing." "You are describing walking into the one event your enemy designed," Sabine said. "Yes, he will expect it. He will expect me to come for him quietly, the way he taught me. He will not expect me to come for him loudly, with a dead girl on my arm and 11 years of his sins in her hand." Corvin almost smiled. "He taught me every quiet thing I know. He never taught me this because he never imagined I would have a reason to be loud." Bram's phone rang before she could answer. He listened, said 3 words and hung up, and his face had gone carefully blank. "That was our man inside the Renard house," Bram said. "Silas sends a message for you, boss. Word for word." He paused. "He says, 'Come and see me before the wedding, son.' He says, 'Bring the girl.'" He already knew her name. Corvin did not go and see Silas. Walking into a room your enemy has invited you into is a thing you do only when you have already won the room, and they had not won anything yet. Instead, he answered the summons the way Silas had taught him, with a silence that said everything, and he spent the next 2 days turning the lake house into a fortress and the wedding into a trap of his own. He should have known that a man who had beaten him for over a decade, without his ever noticing, would not sit still for 2 days. They had gone into the city, the 2 of them, to meet the one family Captain Corvin trusted to stand with him against Silas. When the moment came, a careful old soldier named Rennick, who had never loved Silas and never said so. It was a good meeting. It was the meeting that would win them the room. They had left Thomas at the lake with Bram and 3 men Corvin would have bet his own life on, and in a sense he had. The call came while they were driving back, pleased, almost hopeful, the closest to hopeful Corvin had felt in years. Bram's name, on the screen. Corvin answered it on the speaker so Sabine could hear. And that was a mercy he would regret for the rest of his life, because it meant she heard the whole of it. "Boss." Bram's voice was wrong. Bram's voice was never wrong. "Boss." They came through the tree line. 6, maybe more. Fast, quiet. They knew the house. They knew the house, Corvin. They knew where every man would be. A ragged breath. We are down, I am hit. They did not stay to finish us. Another breath. And this was the one that ended the world. They were not here for us. They took the boy. They took Thomas. And they were gone in 90 seconds. I am sorry. Forgive me. I am sorry I could not. Sabine did not scream. Corvin almost wished she had. She went absolutely still in the seat beside him, so still that for one horrible moment, he thought something inside her had simply stopped, and then she said, in a voice scraped down to nothing, "How did they know the house?" "The house is old family paper," Corvin said. His hands were white on the wheel, bought under a shell. Silas set up 16 years ago. He built the name I hid it under. Of course he knew the house. He knew the house before I did. The truth of it was a blade, going in slow. Every hidden thing Corvin owned had been handed to him by the man he was hiding from. There was no floor under his life that Silas had not poured. You said it was safe. Sabine's voice did not rise. It was worse than rising. You said you would try harder than you have ever tried at anything. He asked you if you could keep me safe, and you said yes to him. To a child you said yes. She was not crying. Her eyes were dry and enormous, and fixed on nothing. I kept him invisible for 11 years. 11 years I touched no one, wanted nothing, so that no one would ever have a thread to pull. And I took your hand on a sea-wall, and I let myself be found. And I let myself hope for one single night. And it cost me the only thing I have ever loved. This is what hope costs people like me. I knew it. I knew it, and I let you make me forget. Corvin had been cut, shot, burned, and betrayed, and none of it had ever hurt, like sitting in that car, unable to say a single true thing that would not be a lie. So he said, the only true thing there was, we are going to get him back. Do not. We are going to get him back, Sabine, and then I am going to do, to Silas Renard, what should have been done to him 11 years ago, and I am not going to feel one moment of what I felt about it before. He took the turn toward the city. Too fast. He made a mistake tonight. For all that time, he has been the only person who understood exactly how much I could be pushed. He does not understand anymore. He thinks he took a piece of leverage. He took the wrong thing from the wrong two people, and he is going to learn what that costs before the sun comes up on his wedding. The phone lit again in her hand, not the dead phone. Her other one, the one only Thomas ever called. She looked at it as though it were a snake. Then she answered, and put it on the speaker with a hand that had finally begun to shake. And Silas Renard's warm and reasonable voice filled the car like smoke under a door. Sabine Voss, Silas said, gentle as a grandfather. You have your mother's patience. I always wondered where it went. A pause, unhurried. A man who had never in his life been rushed. The boy is comfortable. He is asking for you. He is a good boy, which is a credit to you, so I will be plain. Because you have earned plainness. You will bring me the notebook, and whatever my sentimental son took out of my annex. And you will bring them yourself to the wedding tomorrow, and you will hand them to me in a quiet room while 300 people drink my champagne. Do this, and the boy grows up. He never learns any of it. He goes on thinking his sister is boring. The smile was audible. Refuse me, or send Corvin in your place, or do anything at all that is clever, and I will teach that boy exactly what his family was, right before I teach him what it costs to be the last of them. You have until tomorrow evening to decide which kind of woman you are. The line went dead. And Sabine Voss, who had said no to Corvin Mardell every single time he had ever asked her for anything, turned to him in the dark of the car and said the first yes he did not want. I am going to give him what he wants, she said. No, Corvin said. You are going to walk into a room that man designed, alone, and hand him the only proof of what he had done, and trust him to keep his word. He has never kept his word in his life. he will take the notebook, and the boy, and you. And there will be nothing left of the Voss family for anyone to clear. You have a better idea. It was not a question. She had already seen it in him, the cold machine turning behind his eyes. I have a worse one, Corvin said. It only works if he believes you came alone and frightened and beaten, which means it only works if you are the best liar in that room tomorrow. And Sabine, you are a very good liar about large things. He looked at her, and for the first time, he let her see the whole of what he was, all the way to the bottom, the thing his enemies saw last. He wants his stage. We are going to give him his stage. And then, in front of every soul who has ever feared him, we are going to burn it down with him, standing on it. He held out his hand across the dark car, palm up, the way he had on the sea wall. One more? Yes. The last one I will ever ask you for. Do you trust me to get your brother out of that room alive? She looked at his open hand for a long, breaking moment. Then, for the last time in the old way, Sabine Voss said, yes. The wedding was held in a marble hall on the hill, under a ceiling painted with saints, who had never seen anything like the people gathered beneath them. 300 guests. Every family that mattered, dressed like mourners at a very expensive funeral, which in a sense they were. Silas Renard moved among them in a pale gray suit, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, a kind old man watching his life's work come together. And no one in that room but two people knew that the work was not the marriage at all. The marriage was only the wrapping. The gift inside was the quiet room upstairs, where a boy sat guarded, and where a dead woman was going to come and hand Silas the last proof of his sins, so he could finally, after 11 years, burn it. Sabine came alone. She came the way Silas expected her to come, in a plain dark dress, empty-handed except for a notebook worn soft with years. Her shoulders bowed, her eyes down, a woman who had run out of road. Two of Silas's men walked her up the great staircase past the party, and the guests parted for her without seeing her, because she had spent her whole life learning how to be a person no one sees, and she used every hour of that education now, for the last time, to walk into the heart of the thing that had eaten her family and look harmless doing it. Silas was waiting in a study that smelled of lilies and old money. Tomas was in a chair by the window, pale and frightened and unhurt, and when he saw his sister, he started up, and a man's hand on his shoulder sat him back down. There she is, Silas said warmly. The patient girl. Sit. Let me see it. She gave him the notebook. He turned the water-stained pages with genuine appreciation, a craftsman admiring the long labor of an enemy, and Corvin, listening through the wires she wore against her spine, standing very still in a service corridor 30 feet away, let him turn every page. He wanted Silas to hold it. He wanted Silas's fingerprints on his own confession when the doors opened. You understand, Silas said, closing the notebook, that I cannot simply let you walk out. You are a loose thread, Sabine, and I have spent my life pulling loose threads, but the boy is nothing to me. Give me your silence and he keeps his little life. He smiled. You always did want nothing for yourself. It made you so easy to plan around. A person who wants something can be bought. A person who wants nothing, you simply have to erase. I want one thing, Sabine said, and lifted her eyes, and they were not bowed anymore. I want everyone downstairs to hear you say that. Corvin opened the doors. He had not come quietly. He had brought Rennick and the old captain's men, and he had brought the Varga patriarch, Amo Varga, and the heads of 2 other families, walked up a back way on the promise of something no man in that life could refuse, which was the truth about a rival. They filled the study doorway, and behind them the music downstairs faltered as word moved through the hall the way fire moves through a dry field, and Silas Renard, who had never in all the years Corvin knew him lost the count of a room, looked like a man doing sums that would not come out. Say it again, Corvin said. The part about erasing families, say it to Emile, whose men you spent last winter, turning against each other. Say it to me, whose father you buried, and whose hands you used. He set a second stack of paper on the desk. The buried ledgers, the free port accounts, and the whole architecture. 11 years ago, you destroyed the Voss family and their home, and you blamed a house that could not have done it, so that two families would go to war, and you could end it owning both. You did not raise me to rule, Sass. You raised me to be the frightening face on your money. And within the month, Emil, once your daughter had married into my house, you were going to be the next Voss. He does not build alliances, he builds harvests. Emil Varga was a hard old man who had survived 40 years in that life by knowing exactly when he was being played. He looked at the ledgers. He looked at his own accounts named in another man's hand. He looked at Silas, and the last warmth went out of the room. Is it true? Emil said quietly. He was not asking Corvin. Silas Renard was clever to the very end. He did not deny it, because denial in that room was death. He spread his hands, the reasonable grandfather, and he tried to sell it, the way he had sold everything. And for the length of one sentence, Corvin watched the old magic almost work, watched the charm reach for the room, the way it had reached for a frightened 20-year-old at a funeral. Everything I built, Silas said, I built for this family, for all of you. Whatever it cost a few. You would all have done the same, and you know it. And the boy playing king in that doorway is only alive because I chose not to finish a child. Ask him whose mercy he is standing on. I have already asked him, Sabine said. She had crossed to Thomas while every eye was on Silas, and she had the boy behind her now, moving him toward Corvin's men and the door, and the world outside all of this. He says he would rather have had a family. What happened to Silas Renard happened the way these things happen in that world, by the old law, in front of the men whose law it was, and it did not take long, and Corvin did not look away from it, and he did not enjoy it, and he did not feel the thing he had braced his whole life to feel. He had thought killing the man who raised him would tear something out of him. Instead, it only set something down. Some weights, he understood, watching the gray suit go still, are not grief. Some weights are just chains a child was handed too young to refuse. Emil Varga straightened his cuffs the way old men do when they have decided something. There is no wedding, he said to the room, to the city, to the whole arrangement Silas had spent a year building. There was never a wedding. There was a snake selling my daughter a chair he meant to pull out from under her. He looked at Corvin, and there was no love in it, but there was the cold respect one hard man pays another, who has just handed him his own life back. The Voss name is clean. Anyone who says otherwise in my hearing answers to me. That is the only gift I owe you, Mardell, and now I owe you nothing. He turned and went to find his daughter. Renata Varga was in the doorway. She had heard enough. She looked at Corvin. This woman he had almost married as a line item in another man's ledger. And whatever she felt, she folded away as neatly as she folded everything. I never wanted a husband who came with a war, she said. It seems I was engaged to the war, and not the husband. Goodbye, Corvin. Try to deserve her. And she was gone, and the alliance went with her. 300 guests already flowing out the doors and into the night with a story that would be told in that city for 30 years. Then it was quiet, and the saints on the ceiling looked down on one more thing they had seen 1,000 times, and Corvin turned from the body of the only father he had ever known to find the boy safe in the doorway and the boy's sister watching him across the ruined room with an expression he had never seen on her face in all their days. She was looking at him the way she had never once let herself look at anyone. They did not talk that night. There was too much to do, and doing it was a kindness, because it kept the two of them from having to look at the enormous quiet thing the end of the war had left between them. Corvin's people carried out what needed carrying out. Brom, gray-faced and stitched back together by a doctor who filed no paperwork, refused to go to a bed until he had seen with his own eyes that the boy was safe. And when he had seen it, he wept, once, hard, and then never spoke of it again. Thomas fell asleep in the car on the drive back to the lake with his head against his sister's shoulder, and Sabine sat rigid the whole way so as not to wake him, one hand spread flat and protective on his back, and Corvin drove and watched the road and let her have the silence she had earned. It was the next evening, on the porch of the lake house, with the boy inside asleep and the water going gold, that the thing finally had to be spoken. "He will want to know," Sabine said. "Someday. He is too clever not to ask why a man from the city died the night before he did not get married, and why his sister stopped being tired." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I have spent all these years deciding what he gets to carry. I do not know how to stop." "Then do not decide it tonight," Corvin said. "You are allowed to have one night where the only thing you decide is to sit down." She almost smiled. Then she said the thing she had been circling for a day. "What happens now, Corvin?" "To me. To him." She made herself look at him. "You cleared the Voss name in front of the whole city. You cannot unring that. Thomas is a Voss again, which means Thomas is known, which means the invisible life is over whether I like it or not. So I need to hear you say it plainly, the way you say the hard things. What do you want from us? Everyone has a price, and I am too tired to keep pretending you are the one man alive who does not." Corvin was quiet for a long moment. This was the ground he had been most afraid of, more than any wedding, more than Silas, because it was the one place his whole life had left him with no training at all. "I have thought about how to answer that since a seawall," he said. "And every answer I built was a cage with a nicer view, a house I would keep you in, a life I would keep you safe inside, safe the way I keep money, safe the way I keep guns, safe." And you would have said no, and you would have been right, and I would have deserved the no. He looked out at the gold water. "So here is the only answer I have that is not a cage. Nothing. I want nothing from you. There is no price. The name is clean, whether you ever speak to me again or not. There is money for the boys' school that has no string on it, that came from clearing your father's stolen accounts, which means it was always yours. Tomorrow, if you want, Bram drives the two of you anywhere in the world, new papers, real ones, and I never learn the town, and you spend the rest of your life being no one who owes me nothing. That door is open. I built it open, on purpose. I am not going to be the last man who takes your choices from you." Sabine stared at him. Of all the things she had armored herself against, she had no armor for this, and he watched it undo her, exactly as she had once told him her nothing undid him. "You are giving me the door," she said. "You spent your whole life closing doors on people, and you are holding one open for me, and telling me to go." "I am telling you that you can," Corvin said. "That is not the same as telling you to." "Then tell me the other thing." Her voice cracked for the first time since a diner counter. "Do not be careful with me. I have had a lifetime of careful. Tell me the thing you have not said since the market. The thing you gave me your silence instead of." "I am standing in front of an open door. Corvin, give me a reason to be too much of a coward to walk through it." And Corvin Mardell, who had never once in his life said a soft thing out loud where it could be used against him, said it anyway. Because she had asked, and because he had finally met the one person he would rather be a coward for than safe from. "Stay," he said. "Not because you owe me. Not because it is safe. Not because there is a war. There is no war anymore. Stay. Because for 11 years I built a life so cold I could stand to live in it. And then, a woman I thought I had killed slid 2 words across a counter, and I have not been cold since. Stay. Because the boy asked me if I could keep you safe, and I have never wanted to keep a promise so badly. Stay, because I am asking you to. Which is a thing I have never done for anyone, and I am never going to do it for anyone else." He did not step toward her. He let the door stay open between them, which was the whole of what he was giving her. "I would rather have one no from you that you chose than 100 yeses I forced. So, there it is. Stay." For 11 years, Sabine Voss had said no. To everything. because no was the only wall that had ever held, and every yes she had ever given had cost her someone. She looked at the open door he was holding, the first door anyone had ever held open instead of shut, and she understood that walking through it would be the safe thing, the invisible thing, the thing that had kept her and the boy alive. She had spent her whole life being safe. She crossed the porch and put her hand flat against the center of his chest, over the steady, terrible heart of the most dangerous man in the city, and she felt it going hard and fast under her palm, afraid for her, and she left her hand there. "No," she said softly. And then, watching the word land, watching him take it the way he took everything, without flinching, she finished it. "No, I am not going to walk through your door, Corvin. Put it away. I am tired of doors." Her eyes were wet and furious, and finally unguarded. "I am staying. Not because you asked. Because I am choosing it out loud, so no one ever gets to tell me it was done to me." Her hand curled into his shirt. "Do you understand the difference? It matters to me, more than anything in this world, that you understand the difference." "I understand it," Corvin said, and his own voice was not steady either. "It is the only kind of yes I would believe from you." He lifted his hand and covered hers where it gripped his shirt, and then he drew her in, slow enough that she could have stopped it, and she did not stop it. She let herself be held for the first time in more years than she let herself count, all the way, her face against his collar and his arms around the whole of the weight. She had never been allowed to set down, and out on the gold water a bird called once and went quiet. Neither of them said anything else. There was nothing left that needed saying. Inside the house, a boy slept who would grow up believing, correctly, that his sister had never for one day stopped choosing him, and would learn, in time, that she had finally chosen something for herself as well. The city took a long time to stop talking about the wedding that became a reckoning, but cities always move on, and this one moved on to a Corvin Mardell that none of them quite recognized. He did not expand. He did not take the ground the collapse of the Renard web left lying open, though he could have taken all of it and no one would have stopped him. He pulled his family back from a dozen things Silas had made him believe were necessary, and the men who had served a puppet found they now served a man, and were uneasy about it in the way people are uneasy when a weight they have leaned on their whole lives turns out to hold them up on purpose. Emil Varga kept his cold word. The Voss name was spoken again in that city with respect, and the story of what had really happened 11 years ago traveled quietly from table to table until it had settled into fact. A house north of the city, plain and unremarkable, filled slowly with a life. A boy who had believed his sister was boring learned, one careful piece at a time and only as much as he could carry, that she was the bravest person he would ever meet. He took it better than she had feared. Children are stronger than the walls we build to spare them, and Thomas Voss had a sister who had proven, across 11 silent years, exactly where he had learned it. Corvin never once asked Sabine to belong to him, and so, in the way of the only kind of yes he would believe from her, she stayed. She did not become soft. She counted the exits in every room for the rest of her life. But she counted them now from beside him instead of from the shadows, and she found, to her own quiet astonishment, that a person can want nothing from someone and still choose them every single morning, which is a different and far more dangerous thing than needing them. Bram healed slow and came back harder, and Corvin, who had never in his life promoted a man for surviving a mistake, made him more than a driver, because a man who wept over a boy he had failed to protect was exactly the kind of man Corvin wanted close, now that he was choosing what kind of king to be. When a rival family tested the new Corvin that first spring, expecting the old puppet or the young enforcer, they met instead something they had no map for, a man who answered a threat with such precise and total restraint that the threat simply stopped. "He is soft now," some of them said hopefully, once. In a room they thought was private. They were corrected. He was not soft. He had merely stopped mistaking a chain for a spine. And a man who fights only for what he chooses is far more dangerous than one who fights because he was told to. It was a Tuesday, months on, when he found the note. They had stopped at a roadside diner 3 hours from anywhere, the kind of place with mustard-colored booths, and a radio playing something soft because she had wanted to, because she liked to sit in such places now on the free side of the counter and watch other people not notice her. She had gone to pay, out of old habit, in cash. And when Corvin lifted his coffee cup to leave, he found beneath it a receipt, and on the back of it, in a small steady hand, he would have known anywhere in the world, she had written one word: stay. The first thing she had ever given him had said, "Leave now," and he had frozen. And it had cost him everything he thought his life was and given him the only thing it turned out to be. The last thing, on the back of a receipt in a diner at the edge of nowhere, said the opposite, and this time he did not freeze at all. He put the receipt in his breast pocket, over the heart she had once laid her hand on to feel how fast it went for her, and he stayed. He always stayed after that. It was the only promise she ever let him make, because it was the only one she had ever written down. He had walked into a diner to bury a man, and walked out, in the end, having found the one thing in all his cold and ordered life that he would never consider letting go. And that is what happens when a dead woman decides, at last, to live. If you followed Corvin and Sabine all the way from that first receipt to this last one, you already know why this one hits different. She did not need saving. She saved herself for 11 years, and then chose out loud on her own terms to stop being invisible. And he loved her more for the word no than any easy yes. That is the kind of quiet, unbreakable strength we build these stories around. If this one stayed with you, do the thing that helps more people find it. Tap that like button. Subscribe for more grounded mafia stories where the underestimated ones hold all the real power. And tell me down in the comments, what was the exact moment you knew Corvin was finished the second she wrote, "Leave now." I read every one. I will see you in the next story.